The mountains of western Montana don't forgive mistakes. They rise like ancient stone teeth against a sky so vast it makes a man feel both humbled and invisible. In late October, when the aspens turn gold and the first snow dusts the peaks, the silence up there becomes something you can taste, crisp, clean, and sharp as a blade. Nathan, Ghost Reeves, had come to these mountains to disappear, and for 6 months he'd done exactly that. At 36 years old, he was a man carved from hard years and harder choices. His shoulders were broad, built from carrying wounded brothers out of kill zones in Fallujah and Helmand Province. His hands, scarred and calloused, had steady fingers that could assemble a rifle in pitch darkness or stitch a wound with fishing line. But it was his eyes that told the real story, a pale gray that seemed to look through things rather than at them, the 1,000-yard stare of a Navy SEAL who'd seen too much of humanity's darkness and decided he needed to step away from the fire before it consumed him entirely. He lived in a cabin 15 miles outside the town of Timber Ridge, a structure of weathered pine logs that his grandfather had built in the 1960s. No internet, no television, just a wood-burning stove, a collection of dog-eared paperbacks, and the kind of silence that let a man hear his own thoughts for the first time in years. Every morning, he woke before dawn, made strong black coffee in a battered percolator, and ran the logging trails with the only companion who understood him without words. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Odin was a Belgian Malinois, 90 pounds of muscle and loyalty wrapped in a tawny coat marked with a black mask. At 7 years old, he was in his prime, a retired military working dog who had served 3 deployments alongside Nathan in Afghanistan. They'd been through hell together. Odin had detected IEDs that would have turned convoys into burning metal coffins. He'd tracked insurgents through mountain passes where the air was so thin men struggled to breathe. And once, in a firefight outside Kandahar, he'd taken a bullet meant for Nathan, dragging himself back to cover with a shattered front leg that had healed with a slight limp and a jagged scar hidden beneath his fur. Now they ran together through the Montana wilderness, not to outpace enemies or complete missions, but simply to feel alive in a way that didn't involve adrenaline and terror. Nathan's breath fogged in the cold morning air as his boots pounded the dirt trail. Odin moved beside him with fluid grace, his amber eyes scanning the forest with instincts that never truly turned off. The dog was more than a pet. He was Nathan's anchor, the living proof that something good had survived the war. The trail wound through a cathedral of pines where the morning light filtered down in, golden shafts illuminating drifting dust motes and spider webs jeweled with dew. The only sounds were the rhythmic crunch of Nathan's footfalls, the soft panting of the dog, and the distant cry of a hawk circling above the valley. This was peace, not the absence of noise, but the presence of something deeper, a quiet that settled into your bones and reminded you that the world held more than violence and chaos. Nathan slowed to a walk as they reached the ridge overlook, a rocky outcrop that gave a panoramic view of the valley below. Timber Ridge was a speck of civilization nestled between mountains, its main street lined with buildings that looked like they'd been standing since the frontier days. Smoke rose from chimneys in lazy spirals. A school bus crawled along the 2-lane highway. Life, simple and unhurried, unfolded below him like a postcard from a gentler time. He crouched down, running a hand over Odin's head, feeling the warmth of the dog's body against the cold mountain air. "We're doing okay up here, aren't we, boy?" he murmured. Odin leaned into his touch, eyes half closed in contentment, tail swaying slowly. Nathan smiled, a rare expression that softened the hard lines of his face. For the first time since leaving the teams, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could learn to live with the ghosts that followed him. The nightmares were still there, lurking in the corners of sleep, but they were quieter now. The mountains had a way of absorbing pain, of making it feel smaller beneath their ancient, indifferent weight. He didn't know it yet, but this morning's peace was about to shatter. Somewhere below, in those quiet valleys and winding roads, a good woman was fighting for her life, and the mountains, with their cold, impartial silence, were about to call Nathan back to war. Officer Emma Caldwell had been a cop for 8 years, and she loved every difficult, exhausting, heartbreaking minute of it. At 32 years old, she was a woman who commanded respect not through intimidation, but through competence and an unshakable sense of fairness. She stood 5'6" in her boots with dark brown hair usually pulled back in a neat ponytail and green eyes that could be warm as summer grass or cold as winter stone, depending on what the situation demanded. She'd grown up in Timber Ridge, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. Her childhood had been filled with community potlucks, Friday night football games, and the kind of small-town values that made you believe in the inherent goodness of people. When she'd joined the Montana Highway Patrol, her parents had been terrified but proud. Emma had a gift for de-escalation, for talking down drunk drivers and scared teenagers with a calm voice and genuine empathy. She believed in second chances. She believed that most people, given the right nudge, would choose to do the right thing. That belief had made her an exceptional officer. It had also made her a target. For the past 3 months, Emma had been working with a federal task force investigating a trafficking operation that moved through the rural highways of Montana. Not drugs, people. Young women from Eastern Europe, promised jobs in America, then smuggled across the Canadian border and moved south through a network of back roads and safe houses. The operation was sophisticated, well-funded, and protected by layers of corrupt officials who'd been paid to look the other way. Emma had stumbled onto it by accident during a routine traffic stop. A semi-truck with Canadian plates, the driver too nervous, the manifest not quite matching the cargo weight. She'd called it in, waited for backup, and discovered 12 terrified women locked in a hidden compartment, barely able to breathe. The driver had tried to bribe her. When that didn't work, he'd threatened her. She'd arrested him anyway, filed a report that couldn't be buried, and suddenly found herself partnered with federal agents who saw in her the kind of honest cop they desperately needed. She'd been careful. She'd followed protocol. She'd never worked alone, never taken unnecessary risks. But last night, everything had changed. The call had come through dispatch just after 10 p.m., a report of suspicious activity at an abandoned logging camp 15 miles north of Timber Ridge. The informant had used a burner phone and refused to give a name, but the location matched one of the suspected transfer points on Emma's map. She should have waited for her federal partners, but they were 3 hours away in Billings. The informant had said the traffickers would only be there for an hour, transferring cargo before moving on. Emma had made a judgment call. She'd radioed her location, told dispatch she was doing a visual reconnaissance only, and headed up the mountain alone. It was the kind of decision good cops make every day. The calculated risk that separates dedication from recklessness. But Emma's radio had been compromised. Someone on the inside had been listening, waiting, and when she'd driven up that dark mountain road, she'd been heading straight into an ambush. Now, as dawn broke over the mountains, Emma lay at the bottom of a ravine, half buried in brush and broken rock. Her patrol vehicle had been forced off the road by a black SUV, sending her careening through a guardrail and tumbling 200 feet down a steep embankment. The impact had shattered her left leg, cracked ribs, and opened a deep gash across her forehead that had bled freely before clotting in the cold night air. She'd regained consciousness twice during the long, frozen hours of darkness. The first time, she'd tried to reach her radio, only to find it smashed beyond repair. The second time, she'd heard voices above, men laughing, discussing whether they needed to check if she's dead or just let nature handle it. They'd decided on the latter. A fall like that, into a ravine in late October with temperatures dropping below freezing? She'd be a problem that solved itself. But Emma Caldwell was stubborn. Her father used to joke that she'd been born arguing, that she'd come into the world with her fists clenched and her jaw set. That stubbornness had carried her through the police academy when instructors told her she was too small, too soft, too female to hack it. It had carried her through the night when hypothermia tried to drag her under and shock told her body to just give up and sleep. She'd used every trick she knew to stay alive. She'd torn strips from her uniform to bandage the head wound. She'd splinted her broken leg with branches and her duty belt. She'd wedged herself between two rocks to conserve body heat and stayed conscious by reciting case law, the Pledge of Allegiance, and every song lyric she could remember from high school. And when the sun finally rose, painting the ravine in shades of gold and amber, she'd done something that took more courage than facing down armed suspects or testifying against dangerous men. She'd activated her emergency signal beacon, a small device clipped to her vest that transmitted a distress pulse on a frequency monitored by search and rescue teams. The battery was nearly dead, the signal weak, but it was there. A whisper in the electromagnetic spectrum, barely audible above the noise, calling out into the wilderness for someone, anyone who might be listening. Emma didn't know if anyone would hear it. She didn't know if rescue would come in time. But she'd done everything she could do, and now all she had left was faith. Faith that somewhere out there a good person would answer the call. Marcus Volkov didn't look like a monster. At 48, he was a man of average height and build, with thinning brown hair carefully combed to disguise the bald spot, and soft hands that had never done hard labor. He wore expensive suits purchased in Vancouver, drove a leased Mercedes SUV, and spoke with the faint accent of someone who'd emigrated from Eastern Europe 20 years ago and worked hard to blend into North American society. To his neighbors, he was a successful import-export businessman. To the Rotary Club, he was a generous donor. To the trafficked women he smuggled and sold, he was the devil. Volkov operated out of a legitimate freight company based in Kalispell, moving legal cargo, lumber, agricultural equipment, consumer goods, to create cover for the shipments that really mattered. His network extended across 3 provinces and 5 states, protected by a web of bribed officials, compromised cops, and terrified witnesses who knew that speaking out meant death for themselves and everyone they loved. He was careful, methodical, and ruthless in a way that never drew unnecessary attention. Violence was bad for business. Bodies created investigations, and investigations were expensive to manage. Volkov preferred leverage. Photographs, financial records, threats against family members, tools that controlled people without leaving. Forensic evidence. But when leverage failed, when someone became a problem that couldn't be managed quietly, Volkov had men who specialized in making those problems disappear. Sitting beside him in the passenger seat of the black SUV was Dmitry Sokolov, a man who looked exactly like what he was, a blunt instrument of violence wrapped in cheap cologne and knockoff designer clothing. Dmitry was 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle gone soft around the middle, with a shaved head, cold blue eyes, and knuckles scarred from breaking faces and bones. He'd been a boxer in St. Petersburg before a gambling debt had forced him to flee. Now he was Volkov's enforcer, the man who handled situations that required a heavier touch. In the back seat sat two more men, Anton and Pavel, brothers who'd come over on the same boat as Dmitry and shared his casual brutality. They were younger, hungrier, eager to prove themselves in an organization where loyalty was rewarded and weakness was eliminated. They were parked on the shoulder of Highway 93, 3 miles from where they'd run Emma's patrol car off the road 12 hours ago. The early morning sun glinted off the SUV's hood as Volkov sipped coffee from a thermos and studied the ravine below through a pair of binoculars. "Still no movement," he said calmly, his accent making the words sound almost pleasant. "Nature is doing our work for us." Dmitry grunted, picking at his fingernails with a tactical knife. Should have put a bullet in her. Clean. Professional. "And risk a ballistics match when they find the body?" Volkov lowered the binoculars, shaking his head. "No, this was an accident. Officer driving too fast on a dangerous road. Tragic, but not suspicious. Her federal friends will investigate, find nothing, and move on." "What about her files?" Pavel asked from the back, his English heavily accented. "She had reports, evidence." Her computer was in the car. It burned with everything else. Volkov's tone was matter-of-fact. "And our friend in dispatch deleted her last transmission before it reached anyone who matters. As far as the official record shows, she was off duty, driving recklessly, and no one knows she was investigating anything." Dmitry snorted. "Convenient." "Expensive," Volkov corrected. "But that's the cost of doing business in a civilized country. You don't survive by leaving bodies in the street. You survive by making deaths look natural, investigations look clean, and witnesses feel safe enough to stay silent." He raised the binoculars again, scanning the ravine. The twisted wreckage of Emma's patrol car was barely visible through the brush, a crumpled mass of metal that had settled into the creek bed. No smoke, no movement, just the quiet stillness of the wilderness absorbing another tragedy. "We give it 2 more hours," Volkov decided. "If there's still no sign of rescue activity, we leave. Let the coyotes and the cold finish what we started." Anton leaned forward, his voice eager. "And if someone does come?" Volkov's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Then we make sure they have an accident, too. A hiker who got too close to an unstable slope. A hunter who misjudged the terrain. This is wild country. People die here all the time." Dmitry smiled, a cruel twist of his lips that never reached his eyes. He'd killed before, more times than he could count, and the prospect of adding another body to the tally bothered him about as much as swatting a fly. They settled in to wait, the SUV idling quietly on the shoulder, exhaust curling into the cold morning air. Inside, the heater ran, and the men passed around a flask of vodka, laughing about a shipment coming through next week, a particularly profitable package they'd be moving south to buyers in Nevada. None of them noticed the faint electronic pulse emanating from the ravine below. a distress signal so weak it was barely more than static. And none of them saw the lone runner and his dog still miles away, whose morning route was about to intersect with destiny. 12 hours earlier. Emma's headlights cut through the darkness as her patrol car climbed the narrow mountain road. The pavement had given way to gravel 2 miles back, and now the road was little more than twin ruts winding through dense forest. Her GPS showed she was close to the old logging camp. Another quarter mile, maybe less. She should have been nervous. Protocol said wait for backup. Training said never go into an unknown situation alone. But Emma had been a cop long enough to trust her instincts, and her instincts said this tip was solid. If traffickers were moving cargo tonight, she needed eyes on them. She needed plate numbers, vehicle descriptions, anything that could help the task force make arrests that would actually stick. Her radio crackled. Unit 47 dispatch, confirm you're 20? Emma reached for the handset. Dispatch, Unit 47. I'm approximately 3 miles north of mile marker 47 on Forest Service Road 12. Visual recon only. I'll check in every 15 minutes. Copy that, 47. Be safe out there. Always am. She rounded a bend, and the logging camp appeared, a clearing ringed by rusted equipment and collapsing structures, their roofs caved in from decades of snow and neglect. But something was wrong. No vehicles, no lights, no sign of activity at all. Emma frowned, slowing to a stop. Her headlights swept across the clearing, illuminating nothing but weeds and broken concrete. Had the informant been wrong? Or worse, had this been a setup? That's when she saw the tire tracks, fresh ones, cutting across the clearing and disappearing into the trees on the far side. Recent, within the last hour. Her hand moved to her sidearm as she shifted the car into park. She was reaching for her radio to call it in when the night exploded. The impact came from her driver's side, a massive black SUV with no headlights, moving at full speed, slamming into her patrol car with a force that sent her airborne. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered. The world tilted violently as her vehicle spun, careened through brush, and smashed through a guardrail that had been weakened deliberately, its support posts cut halfway through. Emma's scream was swallowed by the roar of crunching metal as her car pitched forward and tumbled down the embankment. The world became a chaos of spinning lights, breaking glass, and the sickening crunch of impact after impact as the vehicle bounced off rocks and trees. Her head cracked against the door frame. Her leg twisted beneath the dashboard. Pain exploded through her body in waves of white-hot agony. And then, finally, silence. She hung upside down in the twisted wreckage, held in place by her seatbelt, blood dripping from her forehead onto the shattered windshield below. The smell of gasoline filled the air, sharp and terrifying. Her radio was sparking, the screen cracked and dark. Above, on the road, she heard voices, men laughing. "Did you see that? Clean takeoff. Is she dead? If she's not, she will be. That's a 200-foot drop and it's going below freezing tonight. We should check. And leave footprints? DNA? No. Volkov said make it look like an accident. An accident doesn't have bullet holes. Let the cold do our work." Emma tried to move, to reach for her backup radio, but the pain was overwhelming. Her vision swam. The voices faded. And then there was only darkness. Present time. Nathan and Odin were 3 miles into their run when the dog stopped abruptly, head tilted, ears pricked forward in sharp attention. Nathan slowed, breath misting in the cold air. "What is it, boy?" Odin's nose worked the wind, pulling in scents from down the valley. Then, without warning, he let out a sharp bark and broke into a run, veering off the main trail toward a steep slope that descended into thick forest. "Odin! Heel!" Nathan commanded, but the dog ignored him, something Odin never did unless he detected a threat or located a target. Nathan's training kicked in instantly. His hand went to his hip, where a concealed Glock 19 sat in a Kydex holster beneath his running jacket. He'd stopped carrying in the field when he retired, but old habits and mountain country had made him cautious. He followed the dog at a sprint, boots finding purchase on loose rock and damp earth. They descended through pine forest, branches whipping at Nathan's face, until they reached a game trail that ran parallel to a dry creek bed. Odin was 20 yards ahead now, moving with the focused intensity of a working dog on mission. Then Nathan heard it, faint but unmistakable. A rhythmic, electronic pulse, barely audible over the sound of wind through trees. A distress beacon. His heart kicked into overdrive. Someone was down here. Someone was hurt. He pushed harder, legs burning, lungs working the thin mountain air. Odin led him down a steep embankment where the earth had been torn up, recently, gouges in the soil still fresh. And there, wedged between two massive boulders and half hidden by brush, was the wreckage. A Montana Highway Patrol cruiser, mangled beyond recognition, its roof crushed, windows blown out, the entire front end accordioned against a boulder. The driver's door hung open at an unnatural angle. Nathan skidded to a stop, his combat medic training instantly cataloging the scene. Severe impact. Rollover. Estimated fall of at least 150, maybe 200 feet. Survival unlikely. But the beacon was still pulsing. "Federal, show me your hands," Nathan barked by instinct, then caught himself. He wasn't federal anymore. He was just a civilian who'd stumbled onto a disaster. Odin was already at the wreckage, sniffing, whining, then barking sharply. The alert bark. Target located. Nathan scrambled down the rocky slope and dropped to his knees beside the dog. That's when he saw her. Officer Emma Caldwell lay partially beneath the vehicle, her body wedged between the crushed door frame and a fallen tree. Her uniform was torn and blood-soaked. Her left leg bent at an angle that made Nathan's stomach clench. Her face was pale as death, smeared with dried blood from the gash across her forehead. But her chest rose and fell, shallow, thready, but alive. "Jesus," Nathan whispered, immediately shifting into triage mode. He pressed 2 fingers to her carotid artery, pulse weak and irregular, but present. He did a rapid visual assessment. Head trauma, obvious fracture to the left femur, probable broken ribs, extensive blood loss. She'd been here all night. In these temperatures, that meant severe hypothermia on top of everything else. Nathan pulled off his jacket, draping it over her torso to combat heat loss, then keyed his cell phone. No signal. They were too deep in the valley. "Odin, stay," he commanded. The dog immediately took up a guard position at Emma's head, lying down to provide body heat near her upper body. Nathan stood, scanning the wreckage more carefully now. That's when he noticed the details that didn't add up. The guardrail debris up the slope, cleanly cut support posts, not broken from impact. The tire marks on the road above, 2 distinct sets, one clearly attempting to block the other. And the smell, faint but present, accelerant. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder. His jaw tightened. Whoever did this might still be close, waiting to make sure their victim didn't survive. He pulled his Glock from its holster, press-checking the chamber out of habit, then returned to Emma's side. He had to move her to get a signal, but moving someone with this many injuries without proper equipment could kill her just as surely as leaving her here. That's when Emma's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, clouded with pain and shock, but conscious. "Easy," Nathan said softly, his voice dropping into the calm, authoritative tone he'd used 1,000 times in combat. "I've got you. You're safe now. My name's Nathan. I'm former military. I found your beacon." Her lips moved, trying to form words. He leaned closer. "Trap," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Watching." Nathan's blood went cold. He lifted his head, scanning the ridgeline above them, and that's when he saw it. Sunlight glinting off glass, someone with binoculars, watching. Before he could move, the sound of an engine roared to life above. A black SUV, suddenly visible on the road, engine revving. They'd been spotted, and whoever had tried to kill Emma Caldwell wasn't about to let a witness walk away. Nathan's mind shifted instantly from civilian to operator, the transformation as natural as breathing. The threat was real, the tactical situation clear. He had a critically injured civilian, limited weapons, no backup, and hostiles with superior position who had already proven willingness to kill. But he also had training that most people couldn't imagine. A dog who'd survived 3 combat deployments, and the absolute certainty that these men were about to learn the difference between hunting an unarmed cop and engaging a Navy SEAL. "Odin, guard," Nathan commanded, his voice sharp and cold as winter steel. The dog's entire demeanor changed. The friendly companion who'd been running beside him vanished, replaced by 80 pounds of trained aggression. Odin positioned himself over Emma's torso, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. Anyone who tried to reach her would lose a limb before they got close. Nathan moved to the wreckage, using it for cover while he assessed the tactical situation. The SUV above was too far for an accurate pistol shot, easily 300 yards up a steep slope, but they had height advantage and could bring fire down on his position. They also had numbers. He'd seen at least 3 silhouettes in the vehicle. His phone was useless here, but Emma's radio might have gotten a transmission out before the crash. He yanked the damaged unit from her belt, noting the cracked screen and the way the metal casing had been bent. Dead. But her backup radio, a small unit clipped to her vest shoulder, was intact. The battery indicator showed red, maybe 5% charge, but it was something. Nathan thumbed the transmit button. "This is an emergency transmission to any law enforcement monitoring this frequency. Officer down, mile marker 47, Forest Service Road 12. Multiple hostiles on scene. I am former military rendering aid. We need immediate air evac and armed response." He released the button. Static. No acknowledgement. But someone might have heard it. In these mountains, radio signals bounced unpredictably off rock faces and valleys. Even a partial transmission could be enough. Above, the SUV's engine revved again, and Nathan watched as it began to descend. Not down the road, but cross-country, churning through brush on a crude dirt track that led down to the creek bed. They were coming for him. Perfect. Nathan had spent 15 years as a SEAL, and one thing that training had burned into his soul was this: never fight on ground the enemy chooses. They had numbers and vehicles. He had terrain knowledge, superior training, and the element of surprise. Time to even the odds. He turned to Emma, whose eyes had cleared slightly. "Can you hear me?" She managed a weak nod. "I'm going to draw them away from you. Odin stays. He'll protect you until I get back. Do not move. Do not call out. Understand?" Another nod, this one more certain. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a compact survival kit he always carried: paracord, a compass, waterproof matches, and a signal mirror. He tucked it into Emma's hand. "If I don't come back, use the mirror. Flash it at the sky every hour. Search and rescue will find you." Her fingers closed weakly around the kit. "Don't die," she whispered. Nathan smiled grimly. "Not planning on it." He stood, giving Odin one last look. The dog met his eyes with absolute understanding. Protect the principal. Hold the position. Rules they'd followed in Kandahar, in Fallujah, and a dozen other places where the margin between life and death was measured in heartbeats. Then Nathan moved. He didn't run. He slipped through the forest like smoke, using every shadow, every depression in the terrain, every piece of cover the mountains offered. He could hear the SUV grinding closer, branches snapping under its wheels, men's voices shouting in Russian. Good. Let them get deeper into his world. He circled wide, moving upslope through dense pine forest where the vehicle couldn't follow, counting steps and breaths, calculating angles and distances with the mechanical precision of a man who'd planned ambushes in worse terrain than this. He reached a position 50 yards to the left of the SUV's path and waited, motionless, his breathing controlled and silent. The SUV came into view below him, a big black Escalade with Montana plates, windows tinted dark. It ground to a halt near the wreckage, and 4 doors opened simultaneously. Volkov stepped out first, scanning the scene with binoculars. Behind him came Dmitri, carrying a hunting rifle with a scope, then Anton and Pavel, both armed with pistols spreading out in a tactical formation that showed military training. "She's still alive," Volkov said in Russian, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "And someone's helping her. Find them. Kill them both." Dmitri chambered around in the rifle. "The dog, too?" "Everything," Volkov said coldly. "No witnesses this time." Nathan's jaw clenched. These men weren't just criminals. They were professionals, organized, disciplined, and clearly experienced in making people disappear, which meant they'd done this before. He watched as Anton and Pavel began moving toward the wreckage where Odin waited, weapons drawn. Dmitri took up an overwatch position on a boulder, scanning the forest with his rifle scope. Volkov stayed by the SUV, directing operations like a commander in the field. Nathan waited until Anton and Pavel were 20 yards from the wreckage. Then he gave a low, sharp whistle, a sound that carried through the forest like a bird call. Odin exploded into action. The dog launched himself from his position, not at the men. That would have been suicide against armed targets, but toward the densest part of the forest, barking and snarling, drawing attention and fire away from Emma. "There!" Pavel shouted, spinning and firing 3 wild shots that splintered trees but came nowhere close to the dog. Anton ran after him, crashing through brush, his pistol up and tracking, which left Dmitri focused on the forest below, his rifle aimed toward where Odin had vanished, and Volkov alone by the SUV. Nathan moved. He came down the slope in complete silence, a ghost descending from the mountain, his Glock up in a 2-handed grip, sights aligned on center mass. He covered the distance in seconds, boots finding purchase on rock and root without a sound. Volkov sensed movement at the last instant, turning just as Nathan emerged from the tree line 15 feet away. Their eyes met. Volkov's went wide with recognition of what he was seeing. Not a frightened civilian, but a predator who'd been hunting men since Volkov was running immigrant scams in the Brighton beach. "Don't," Nathan said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority. Volkov's hand started toward the pistol in his belt. Nathan closed the distance in 2 strides and drove the butt of his Glock into Volkov's temple with surgical precision. The man dropped like a puppet with cut strings, unconscious before he hit the ground. 1 down. Dmitri heard the sound of impact and spun on his boulder perch, rifle swinging toward the SUV. He saw Volkov crumpled on the ground and a tall figure standing over him. Military stance, weapon discipline, eyes scanning for additional targets. "Contact!" Dmitri screamed in Russian. "By the vehicle!" Nathan was already moving, using the SUV for cover as Dmitri's rifle cracked once, twice, rounds punching through sheet metal and spiderwebbing the windshield. He dropped to a crouch, assessing his options. 3 hostiles still active. 1 with a scoped rifle and high ground. 2 with pistols somewhere in the forest, tracking Odin. The tactical math wasn't good, but tactical math never accounted for one critical variable: the enemy's training versus his own. Dmitri chambered another round, his voice echoing through the trees. "You picked the wrong fight, friend. We are many. You are alone." Nathan didn't answer. Talking in a firefight was for movies and amateurs. He thumbed the magazine release on his Glock, checking the round count by weight. 12 rounds left. Not enough for a protracted engagement, but enough if he made every shot count. He needed to change the dynamic, even the odds. From deep in the forest came Odin's bark, not frantic but controlled. The dog was herding the 2 gunmen, pushing them toward a specific location. Nathan smiled grimly. Odin remembered the training. Push the enemy into the kill zone. Let the operator do what operators do. Anton and Pavel crashed through brush, breathing hard, weapons up but aim wild as they tried to track the barking. They moved like men who'd fired guns before but never been hunted by anything that could hunt back. They emerged into a small clearing and stopped, backs to each other, scanning the forest. That's when Odin came at them from behind, low and fast, jaws clamping onto Pavel's ankle with crushing force. The man screamed, firing blindly into the dirt as he went down. Anton spun, trying to get a shot, but the dog was already gone, vanished back into the undergrowth. "Where is it?" Anton shouted, voice breaking with panic. "Where's the fucking dog?" Pavel clutched his bleeding leg, cursing in Russian. And Nathan, who'd circled behind them while they were distracted, stepped out of the trees 20 feet away, Glock leveled, stance perfect. "On the ground," he said quietly. "Now." Anton wheeled, pistol coming up. Nathan fired once. The shot was precise, professional, the kind of accuracy that comes from thousands of hours of training. The round hit Anton's weapon, tearing it from his grip and spinning him around. Pavel tried to raise his pistol despite the wounded leg. Nathan fired again. Another disabling shot, hitting Pavel's gun hand, the pistol clattering away into the brush. "I said on the ground," Nathan repeated, voice still calm. "Last warning." Both men dropped, hands visible, fear finally replacing bravado. Nathan moved forward, kicking their weapons away, securing them with plastic zip ties from his pocket. "How many others?" he demanded. "Just Dmitri," Anton gasped, cradling his injured hand. "Just the one on the rocks." "Who hired you?" "We don't know names. We just—" A rifle shot cracked through the air, bark exploding from a tree 6 inches from Nathan's head. Dmitri, firing from his elevated position, still trying to control the fight. Nathan grabbed Anton and Pavel, dragging them behind a fallen log for cover. "Stay down," he growled. "That's the only reason you're still breathing." He needed to neutralize Dmitri, but a man with a scoped rifle and elevation was a sniper's dream. Direct assault was suicide. Flanking would take time he didn't have, which left one option: make the sniper come to him. Nathan keyed Emma's radio again, knowing Dmitri might be monitoring police frequencies. "This is the operator at the crash site. Officer is stable. Air evac is inbound. ETA 10 minutes. Multiple suspects in custody. Armed response en route." It was all a lie, but lies in combat were weapons. On his boulder, Dmitri heard the transmission and went rigid. His eyes darted to Volkov, still unconscious by the SUV. 10 minutes until helicopters arrived. 10 minutes until the entire countryside crawled with law enforcement. He had to move, had to eliminate the threat and extract. Now, Dmitri abandoned his position, rifle up, moving down from the rocks toward the SUV, where he could grab Volkov and run. It was the logical choice, the only choice. It was also exactly what Nathan had wanted him to do. As Dmitri emerged into the open, focused on reaching the vehicle, Odin hit him from the side like a freight train. The dog's momentum drove Dmitri into the dirt, the rifle spinning away. Odin's jaws clamped onto the man's forearm, holding him pinned, snarling and thrashing to keep the larger man from gaining leverage. Nathan broke cover and sprinted across the clearing. By the time Dmitri managed to throw Odin off and scrambled to his feet, Nathan was already there. Their eyes met. Dmitri's hand went for a knife on his belt. Nathan's boot caught him in the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. As Dmitri doubled over, Nathan delivered a precise strike to the side of his neck, a nerve cluster blow that dropped the big man instantly. Silence fell over the clearing. Nathan stood among 4 unconscious or restrained hostiles, breathing hard, adrenaline singing through his veins. Odin limped over, favoring his left front paw where Dmitri had kicked him. Nathan dropped to one knee, running gentle hands over the dog's body, checking for injuries. Nothing serious, just bruises and a sore paw. "Good boy," Nathan whispered, pressing his forehead against Odin's. "Good boy." The dog's tail wagged once, then he pulled away and trotted back toward the wreckage where Emma lay. Nathan followed, holstering his weapon, the immediate threat neutralized. But as he approached the vehicle, he heard something that made his blood run cold. A helicopter. Not the rescue he'd lied about. This one was coming from the north, fast and low. And when he saw the unmarked black helicopter cresting the ridge, he realized this wasn't over. Volkov had called for backup. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. The helicopter descended into the clearing with military precision, rotors kicking up dust and pine needles in a whirlwind. It was a Bell 407, civilian model but modified. No markings, blacked-out windows, the kind of aircraft that showed up in places it wasn't supposed to be doing things it shouldn't do. Nathan grabbed Emma by her vest and dragged her deeper into cover behind the wreckage. Odin staying close, hackles raised as the aircraft touched down 50 yards away. 2 men emerged before the skids even settled. Both wore tactical gear, plate carriers, helmets, rifles with optics. Professional military contractors, the kind who worked for whoever paid best and didn't ask questions about legality or morality. They moved to Volkov's unconscious form, one covering while the other checked his pulse and vitals. The covering man's rifle swept the tree line with practiced efficiency. Nathan kept his breathing shallow, Glock in hand, calculating. 2 trained operators with rifles versus his pistol. Bad odds made worse by Emma's condition. He couldn't move her fast enough to evade if they pursued. The contractor checking Volkov spoke into a throat mic. Primary is alive but unconscious. Multiple friendlies down. Recommend immediate extraction. A voice crackled back through his earpiece, tinny but audible to Nathan's sharp ears. Negative. Secure the area first. Eliminate the interference. The man's head came up, scanning. What interference? Someone took down 4 of our people. They're still on site. The contractors exchanged a look. Then they began moving toward the forest with the coordinated precision of a practiced team, rifles up, covering each other's sectors. Nathan had seconds to make a choice. Engage now from poor position, or wait and let them get close enough for the odds to shift. His SEAL training gave him the answer. Never fight fair. Always stack the deck. He pulled his tactical knife from his belt, a bench-made infidel with a 3.9-inch blade, and threw it underhanded toward a tree 20 yards to the left. The knife struck wood with a solid thunk. Both contractors spun toward the sound, rifles tracking. Nathan moved. He came up from behind the wreckage, firing 3 rapid shots at the nearest contractor, not center mass where body armor would stop the rounds, but at the gap between the plate carrier and helmet. 2 shots missed as the man dove. The third grazed his shoulder, spinning him. The second contractor returned fire immediately, rounds stitching across the wrecked patrol car, forcing Nathan back into cover. But Odin was already in motion. The dog flanked wide, using terrain that the contractors couldn't see from their position, and came at the wounded operator from behind. 80 pounds of Belgian Malinois hit him in the back, jaws clamping onto his rifle arm, dragging it down and away. The man screamed, trying to shake the dog loose, giving Nathan the opening he needed. He broke cover and closed distance fast. Glock up, firing twice at the second contractor who was trying to get an angle on Odin. The rounds hit his rifle's magazine well, jamming the weapon. The man dropped it and went for his sidearm. Nathan was faster. He closed the final yards and delivered a brutal front kick to the contractor's chest, sending him sprawling backward. Before the man could recover, Nathan was on him, knees pinning his arms, Glock pressed to the gap in his helmet. "How many more are coming?" Nathan demanded. The man's eyes were wide behind his ballistic glasses. "Just us. We were the quick reaction force." "Who hired you?" "Volkov contracts us through a shell company. We don't ask questions. We just—" The crack of a gunshot cut him off. Blood sprayed. The contractor's body went limp. Nathan spun to see Dmitri, barely conscious 20 yards away with Volkov's dropped pistol in a trembling hand. The shot had been meant for Nathan but hit the contractor instead. Nathan raised his Glock, but Dmitri was already collapsing, the weapon falling from his grip. The effort of firing had been too much for his concussed state. Behind Nathan, Odin had released the first contractor, who now lay on the ground clutching his wounded arm, his rifle discarded, any fight gone from his eyes. Nathan stood slowly, breathing hard, surveying the carnage. 6 men down, 1 dead from friendly fire, the rest injured or unconscious. The helicopter sat idle, pilot still inside, hands visible on the controls, clearly wanting no part of whatever war zone his passengers had stumbled into. Nathan approached, Glock trained on the cockpit. Out. Slowly. The pilot complied, hands up, face pale. He was in his 50s, weathered, with the look of a man who'd flown choppers in Vietnam and had seen enough combat to know when to surrender. "I'm just a driver," he said, voice steady despite the circumstances. "I fly where they pay me to fly. I don't shoot anybody." "Then you get to live," Nathan said. "Keys. Now." The pilot tossed them over. Nathan caught them one-handed, never taking his eyes or weapon off the man. "You're going to call the Montana Highway Patrol," Nathan continued. "Tell them you found a crashed police cruiser and an injured officer. Give them these coordinates." He rattled off the GPS position from memory. "Then you're going to sit down right there and wait for them to arrive." The pilot nodded quickly. "You got it. And if Volkov wakes up and tries to run, you tackle him. Understand?" "Understood," Nathan whistled sharply. Odin trotted over, panting, tail wagging despite the blood on his muzzle. The dog was exhausted but unbroken, eyes still sharp. "Stay," Nathan commanded, pointing at the pilot. "Guard." Odin sat, fixing the pilot with an unblinking stare that said more eloquently than words, "If you move, I bite." Nathan jogged back to the wreckage where Emma lay. Her eyes were open, watching him, and there was something like awe mixed with terror on her face. "Who?" she managed. "Who are you?" "Nobody important," Nathan said, kneeling beside her and doing a rapid medical check. Pulse still weak, pupils reactive. She was holding on, but barely. "But I'm not leaving you." He pulled out his phone. Still no signal. But if that helicopter had been able to communicate... He grabbed the radio from the downed contractor's tactical vest. Military-grade encryption, but the emergency channel should be open. He keyed the mic. "This is a civilian emergency broadcast. I have a critically injured Montana Highway Patrol officer at the following coordinates." He repeated the position. "Multiple suspects in custody. We need immediate air evac and armed law enforcement response." This time, an answer came back immediately. "Civilian caller, this is Life Flight Montana. We copy your position and are launching now. ETA 20 minutes. Relief flooded Nathan's chest. Copy that, Life Flight. Be advised there is a civilian helicopter on scene that can be used if needed. Negative, civilian. We have our own equipment. Please secure the landing zone and prepare the patient for transport." Nathan smiled grimly. After 15 years of coordinating combat operations, preparing an LZ was like breathing. He looked down at Emma, whose eyes were growing heavy. "Hey, stay with me. Helicopter's coming. 20 minutes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're walking again." Her fingers weakly gripped his hand. "Never." Walked away. Nathan understood. She was telling him about herself, about who she was. A cop who never walked away from duty, even when it meant charging into traps. "Yeah," he said softly. "I know the type." The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Nathan worked steadily, using supplies from the first aid kit in the contractor's helicopter to stabilize Emma as best he could. He splinted her broken leg properly, using rigid materials from the wreckage. He packed the head wound with clean gauze and started an IV line from the medical kit, keeping her hydrated. Every movement was efficient, precise, the muscle memory of a combat medic who'd done this under fire 100 times. Odin lay beside Emma, his body providing warmth, his presence a comfort. The dog had stopped panting and now rested quietly, trusting Nathan to handle the rest. The pilot, true to his word, had called in the location and now sat with his hands zip-tied behind his back, watching Nathan work with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You're military," the pilot finally said. "I can tell by the way you move, the way you secured the area. You're not just some guy who knows first aid." Nathan didn't answer. His focus stayed on Emma, on keeping her stable until help arrived. "Navy?" the pilot continued, narrowing his eyes. "SEALs, maybe? You got that look. My son-in-law was a SEAL. He moves like you do, like a cat that's always ready to pounce." Nathan looked up briefly. Your son-in-law teach you to keep your mouth shut? The pilot smiled faintly. He tried. I'm not great at it. A sound cut through the forest, the distant whump whump of rotors, multiple helicopters coming fast. Nathan stood, scanning the sky. 2 aircraft appeared over the ridge. The first was clearly Life Flight, a Eurocopter AS-350 painted in medical livery, its rotors slicing through the morning air with purposeful speed. The second was Montana Highway Patrol, a smaller Bell 206 with law enforcement markings. They descended into the clearing Nathan had cleared of debris, landing 50 yards apart with practiced precision. The Life Flight team, a pilot, a flight paramedic, and a flight nurse, was out and moving within seconds, carrying their equipment toward the wreckage. The Highway Patrol helicopter disgorged 4 armed troopers, weapons drawn, eyes sweeping the scene with professional paranoia. Hands where? We can see them! The lead trooper barked, rifle trained on Nathan. Nathan raised his hand slowly, his voice calm. I'm the one who called it in. Officer Emma Caldwell is the injured party. Multiple suspects are secured and disarmed. The trooper's eyes tracked across the scene. The unconscious men, the weapons scattered across the ground, the blood, the wrecked vehicles. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Then, louder, who the hell are you? Before Nathan could answer, a voice cut across the clearing. Stand down, trooper. I know him. Everyone turned. From the Highway Patrol helicopter, a woman stepped out. She was in her mid-50s, wearing a captain's uniform with crisp authority. Her silver hair was cut short, her blue eyes sharp as broken glass, and when she walked, it was with the measured confidence of someone who'd commanded respect for decades. Captain Sarah Mitchell, Emma's commanding officer. She approached Nathan slowly, studying him with the kind of gaze that saw through bullshit and bravado. Nathan Reeves, she said, not a question. Nathan lowered his hands, surprise flickering across his face. Captain Mitchell. You don't remember me, do you? She stopped 10 feet away, a faint smile touching her lips. I was Lieutenant Mitchell when we met. Afghanistan, 2011. You and your team pulled our convoy out of an ambush in Helmand Province, saved 12 lives that day. The memory clicked into place. A dusty road, a convoy of police trainers pinned down by Taliban fighters. Nathan's SEAL team had been running Overwatch and had turned the ambush into a killing field in under 3 minutes. I remember, Nathan said quietly. You were teaching Afghan police how to do their jobs. And you were teaching Taliban how to die, Mitchell replied. Good to see you're still doing the Lord's work, even after you retired. The tension in the clearing eased. The troopers lowered their weapons, though they kept them at the ready. Mitchell turned to the Life Flight team. How's my officer? The flight paramedic, a woman in her 30s with the efficient manner of someone who'd seen too many traumas, looked up from where she knelt beside Emma. Critical but stable. Multiple traumatic injuries, severe hypothermia, but she's got fight left. We need to move her now. Then move her, Mitchell ordered. She turned back to Nathan. I'm going to need a statement from you, a long one, but first. She gestured to the carnage around them. Tell me what the hell happened here. Nathan gave her the short version. The morning run, Odin's alert, finding Emma, the ambush, the fight. He kept it factual, clinical, leaving out the emotional weight. Mitchell listened without interrupting, her expression hardening with each detail. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at Odin, who sat patiently beside Nathan, tongue lolling, looking for all the world like a friendly pet rather than a combat-tested warrior. That your dog? Best partner I ever had. Mitchell walked over to Odin, crouching down to meet the dog's eyes. Odin's tail wagged slowly, reading the woman's energy, authority but not threat. Good boy, Mitchell said softly, running a hand over Odin's head. Then she stood, looking at Nathan. Emma's been working a federal trafficking case for 3 months. We suspected a leak in our department, someone feeding information to the traffickers. She was getting close to exposing them. And they tried to silence her, Nathan said. They tried, Mitchell agreed, but they didn't count on you. One of the troopers called out, Captain, this one's coming around. Volkov was stirring, groaning, his eyes fluttering open. Mitchell strode over, standing above him as he blinked up at her. Marcus Volkov, she said, her voice cold as winter. You have the right to remain silent. As she read him his rights, Nathan turned his attention back to Emma. The flight team had her on a backboard now, an oxygen mask over her face, IV lines running clear fluids. She was barely conscious, but her eyes found Nathan's as they lifted her onto the stretcher. He walked beside them to the helicopter, Odin at his heels. You're going to be fine, Nathan told her. You're tough, tougher than you look. Emma's hand moved weakly, reaching for him. He took it gently. They said, You were nobody, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rotors spinning up. Who are you, really? Nathan smiled faintly. Just a guy who runs with his dog in the mornings. Bullshit. She managed a weak smile. I know, a warrior, when I see one. The flight paramedic gently pulled Nathan back. We need to go, now. Nathan released her hand, watching as they loaded her into the helicopter. As the aircraft lifted off, rotors thumping, he stood in the swirling dust and watched until it disappeared over the ridge. Mitchell approached, standing beside him. She's gonna make it, the captain said. Thanks to you. Thanks to Odin, Nathan corrected. He's the one who found her. Mitchell smiled. You SEALs never take credit for anything. We take credit for results, Nathan said. Everything else is just noise. Behind them, the troopers were securing Volkov and the other suspects, reading them their rights, cataloging evidence. The clearing that had been a battlefield an hour ago was now a crime scene, cordoned off and documented with professional efficiency. Mitchell pulled out a business card, handing it to Nathan. I'm going to need you to come in for a formal statement, but not today. Today, you go home, rest, decompress. Come see me tomorrow at the district office. Nathan took the card, nodding. What about these men? Federal trafficking, attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, and about 6 other charges I'll think of on the helicopter ride back. They're done. Their organization is done, and when Emma wakes up, she's going to finish what she started. Testimony that will bury these bastards for life. Good. Mitchell studied him for a moment. Why'd you come back here, Reeves? Montana's a long way from Virginia Beach. Nathan looked out at the mountains, at the endless forest rolling away to the horizon. I needed to remember what quiet sounded like. You find it? For a while. He glanced at Odin, who sat patiently beside him, waiting. Then the dog reminded me that sometimes quiet isn't the point. Sometimes you're quiet so you can hear when someone needs help. Mitchell smiled. Your grandfather would be proud. He was a good man. Nathan's throat tightened. He'd known Mitchell had recognized him, but he hadn't realized she'd known his family. He taught me to run toward trouble, Nathan said softly. even when everyone else is running away. That's the job, Mitchell agreed, whether you wear the badge or not. By midday, the clearing had been fully secured. Federal agents had arrived, FBI and Department of Homeland Security, turning the remote crash site into a hub of activity. Evidence technicians photographed every angle. Investigators interviewed witnesses. Volkov and his men were loaded into transport vehicles, shackled and silent. Nathan had given his preliminary statement to an FBI agent, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who took notes without comment and promised follow-up questions later. Then he'd been released to go home, with Mitchell's card in his pocket and Odin limping beside him. They drove back to the cabin in Nathan's old Ford pickup, the heater running, country music playing softly on the radio. Odin lay on the passenger seat, head on Nathan's thigh, finally relaxing after hours of high alert. "You did good today, buddy," Nathan said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Real good." Odin's tail thumped once against the seat. When they reached the cabin, Nathan spent an hour checking Odin thoroughly, examining every inch of the dog's body for injuries he might have missed in the chaos. Bruises on the shoulder from where Dmitri had kicked him, a scraped pad on the left front paw, a small cut near his ear that Nathan cleaned and treated with antibiotic ointment. Nothing serious, nothing that wouldn't heal in a week or two, but Nathan felt the weight of what could have happened, how close he'd come to losing his best friend. He made Odin a meal of premium kibble mixed with ground beef, the kind of reward meal saved for special occasions. The dog ate slowly, methodically, then padded over to his bed by the fireplace and collapsed with a deep sigh. Nathan built a fire, watching the flames catch and spread, the warmth seeping into the cabin's cold corners. Then he sat in his grandfather's old recliner, a glass of whiskey in hand, and let the adrenaline finally drain away. His phone buzzed. A text from Mitchell. "Emma's out of surgery. Stable condition. Doctors say full recovery expected. You saved her life, Reeves." Nathan typed back, "The dog saved her life. I just showed up." Mitchell's response came immediately. "Stop being humble. It doesn't suit you. Come by tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't be late." Nathan smiled faintly, setting the phone aside. Outside, snow began to fall, the first real storm of the season, fat flakes drifting down from a gray sky. The mountains were beautiful in winter, Nathan thought. Harsh and unforgiving, but beautiful. He looked at Odin, sleeping peacefully by the fire, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. "We're not done yet, are we?" Nathan said softly. The dog's ear twitched, even in sleep, always listening. Nathan raised his glass toward the fire, to warriors who never quit, to dogs who never fail, and to the people worth fighting for. He drank deeply, feeling the whiskey burn, warming him from the inside. Tomorrow, he'd go to the district office. He'd give his statement. He'd help Mitchell and the FBI build a case so airtight that Volkov and his organization would never see daylight again. But tonight, in this cabin surrounded by mountains and silence, Nathan allowed himself something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in himself, in what he'd done, in the fact that when the call came, even though he'd tried to walk away from that life, he'd answered. Because some men are built to run toward gunfire. Some men are built to stand between the innocent and the wolves, and some dogs are built to fight beside them, no matter the cost. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering the mountains in white, erasing footprints and tire tracks, bearing the evidence of violence beneath a blanket of winter peace. 3 days after the ambush, Nathan sat in Captain Mitchell's office at Montana Highway Patrol Headquarters in Helena. The room smelled of coffee and old paper, the walls lined with commendations and photos of officers past and present. Mitchell sat across from him, a thick file folder spread open on her desk. "We've been digging into Volkov's operation," she began, her tone businesslike. "What we've found is extensive." Nathan leaned forward, listening. Volkov wasn't just running trafficking. He was the logistics coordinator for a network that spans 3 countries. Canadian entry points, American distribution, Mexican buyers. The women he was moving? Just one product line. He was also facilitating arms deals, money laundering for drug cartels, even stolen pharmaceuticals. Nathan's jaw tightened. How big? $50 million a year conservatively, Mitchell said. And here's the part that should concern you. We found your name in his files. Nathan went still. My name? Mitchell pulled out a printed document, sliding it across the desk. It was a surveillance photo. Nathan running on the mountain trail 3 weeks ago, Odin beside him. Below the photo, a notation in Russian, translated, "Potential interference. Former military, living at grandfather's property, monitor." "They'd been watching you," Mitchell said. "Volkov's people knew who you were. When you showed up at that crash site, it wasn't just bad luck for them. They knew they were going up against a SEAL." Nathan's blood went cold. They were planning something. "We think so. We found maps of your property, surveillance logs, even a draft contract for a sanitation job, their code for assassination." Mitchell's expression was grim. "You stopped them from killing Emma, but you also stopped them from killing you." Nathan sat back, processing. "Why target me? I've been out of the game for 6 months. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," Mitchell corrected. "You're a trained operator living in their operational area. You're a potential witness, and based on the notes we found, they believed you'd been sent to investigate them, that your retirement here was a cover." "Paranoid," Nathan muttered. "Paranoid criminals stay out of prison longer," Mitchell said. "But here's the good news. We've rolled up the entire operation. 17 arrests in 3 states and 2 provinces. The FBI is prosecuting this as a RICO case. Racketeering, trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder. Volkov's looking at life without parole, and so is everyone in his inner circle." Nathan nodded slowly. "And Emma?" Mitchell's expression softened. "She's awake, doing better than expected. She's asking to see you." Nathan drove to the hospital in Missoula that afternoon, Odin riding shotgun. The regional medical center was a modern building of glass and steel, busy with the controlled chaos of a level 2 trauma center. He found Emma in a private room on the 4th floor, her left leg elevated in traction, monitors beeping softly beside her bed. She looked pale and thin, dark circles under her eyes, but when she saw Nathan and Odin enter, her face lit up with a smile that transformed her entirely. "There's my heroes," she said, her voice still raspy but strong. Odin patted over immediately, resting his head gently on the edge of her bed. Emma reached down, running her fingers through his fur. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such a good boy." Nathan pulled up a chair, sitting beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck and thrown off a cliff," Emma said, then laughed softly. "Wait, that's exactly what happened. Doctors say you'll make a full recovery. 3 months of physical therapy, maybe longer." She looked down at her splinted leg. "But I'll walk again, run again, get back on patrol." "You sure that's what you want?" Nathan asked quietly. After what happened, Emma's eyes hardened, green fire burning beneath the exhaustion. Those men tried to kill me because I was doing my job. If I quit, they win. If I walk away, every other cop who's trying to stop monsters like Volkov gets the message that it's not worth it. She met Nathan's gaze. I don't quit, ever. Nathan smiled. Yeah, I got that impression. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the beeping monitors filling the space. Mitchell told me about your file, Emma finally said, about how Volkov was planning to kill you. I figured they'd try eventually. Doesn't that scare you? Nathan considered the question. Fear's just information. It tells you when you're in danger, but it doesn't tell you to run. That's a choice. Emma studied him, this quiet man who'd appeared out of nowhere and saved her life. You could have walked away. When you found me, you could have called it in and left. Nobody would have blamed you. Yeah, Nathan said, I could have. But you didn't. No. Why? Nathan looked at Odin, who'd curled up on the floor beside Emma's bed, eyes half closed but still alert. Because I spent 15 years as a SEAL, learning that the only thing that matters is what you do when it's your turn. When the call comes, some people freeze, some people run, and some people step up. He looked back at Emma. You stepped up when you took on Volkov's operation. I just did the same thing. Emma's eyes glistened. Thank you. For my life. For not leaving me. You already thanked me. In the ravine, remember? That was before I knew you'd taken on 4 armed men to protect me. 5, Nathan corrected with a faint smile. Don't forget the helicopter guys. Emma laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at her ribs. Ow, don't make me laugh. There was a knock at the door. Captain Mitchell entered, followed by 2 people in suits, FBI agents by their bearing. Sorry to interrupt, Mitchell said, but there's something we need to discuss. With both of you. Nathan and Emma listened as the FBI agents laid out the situation. Volkov's organization had been decapitated, but the prosecution needed more than just surveillance and financial records. They needed testimony. Emma's testimony about what she'd discovered. Nathan's testimony about the ambush and the subsequent fight. Problem is, the lead agent said, a man in his 50s named Carver with a face like weathered leather. Volkov's lawyers are already building a defense. They're claiming Emma's investigation was tainted, that she violated procedure by going alone to the crash site. They're claiming Nathan used excessive force and that the confessions we got aren't admissible. Bullshit, Mitchell said flatly. Maybe, Carver agreed, but they've got high-priced lawyers who specialize in making bullshit smell like roses. To lock this down, we need ironclad testimony from both witnesses in a federal courthouse, under oath. Emma didn't hesitate. I'm in. Everyone looked at Nathan. He thought about the quiet cabin, the peace he'd found in the mountains, the life he'd built away from violence and testimony in courtrooms. Then he thought about the women Volkov had trafficked, the lives destroyed, the evil that would continue if men like Volkov walked free. When's the trial? He asked. Carver smiled. 6 weeks. We'll prep you both thoroughly. And Mr. Reeves, he pulled out a document. The Bureau would like to offer you a consulting contract. We could use someone with your skill set helping us. Train tactical response teams. Nathan took the document, scanning it. Good money, interesting work, a way to use his training without going back to full-time military service. I'll think about it, he said. That's all we ask. After the agents left, Mitchell lingered. You know what this means, she said to Nathan. Once you testify, Volkov's people will know exactly who you are. Your face will be in court documents, your identity public. I know. Your quiet life in the mountains? That's over. Nathan looked at Odin, then at Emma lying in the hospital bed, bandaged and broken, but undefeated. Maybe quiet was never the point, he said. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Was it the K-9's loyalty, the SEAL's protection, or the moment justice was served? We read every comment. God bless, and see you in the next story.